Sisters and brothers, for the time is ours to share together this Lord's Day with your prayers and the Holy Spirit's help. I'd like to preach from the title, I'm Tired of This. I'm tired of this. Sisters and brothers, the CBCNEWHAVEN is the Center for Disease Control and Prevention reports that in the United States, around 15.3% of women and 10.1% of men regularly feel tired. Feeling tired can produce a wide array of problems from all kinds of health conditions, taking a toll on one's total condition, affecting the entirety of the being, physical, mental, and spiritual. Medical news today suggests that there may be 5 reasons why we're tired. One is a lack of sleep. This may be the most obvious reason, yet 1 in 3 are consistently not getting enough of it. Number 2 is a poor diet. Doctors suggest the simplest way to stop being tired is to make simple adjustments to your diet. Eating a healthful and balanced diet can make a world of difference to how you feel, supposedly. Number 3, a sedentary lifestyle. While this seems counterintuitive, sitting on the couch and going to lay down is not always the best solution for being tired. Studies show that even moderate exercise for 20 minutes helps to boost energy and reduce fatigue. Number 4 is excessive stress, from work to financial problems to relationship issues to major life transitions. They can all take a toll on us. Number 5 is medical conditions, of course, since doctors wrote this, even if lifestyle changes are made, such as changes in sleep, physical activity, diet, stress levels, and tiredness still occurs, it could be symptomatic of an underlying medical condition. Church family, while this list certainly feels comprehensive in nature, though I am no doctor, I would like to suggest that perhaps there is a 6th reason why some of us are tired. The 6th reason I would like to suggest why we are tired is a misalignment of purpose. You see, beloved, as we continue our sermonic and study series throughout the book of Nehemiah, God's purpose through God's people is what prevails through each sin. From the time we first see Nehemiah serving as cupbearer to the king in Persia, all the way to now, when we see Nehemiah serving as governor, visionary, and even construction site manager of Jerusalem, what has gotten Nehemiah and the people to this point has been God's purpose through God's people. We have journeyed alongside these Jerusalemites as they have been about rebuilding the wall, which is really about restoring their witness. Already in these first 4 chapters, we have seen time and time again how the odds were stacked totally against them. See, the wall was completely torn down by their enemies. Part of it was even burned. No one took an interest in repairing it, even their own people. Previous attempt at restoring it had failed. They were still colonized and under the control of a foreign king. Their neighbors surrounded them, hated them, and sought their demise, and their human and financial resources were lacking. Yet and still, as God's people with God's purpose, through the vision God gave Nehemiah, as we saw last week in Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 6, despite the taunts of their enemies, because they had a mind to work, they rebuilt the wall, and all the wall was joined together to half its height. Something happens between the 6th and the 7th verse, this 4th chapter. People's enemies, who the text records there in verse 7 as Sanballat and Tobiah and their whole crew, when they heard that God's people were prevailing in God's purpose for them, that the repairing of the walls of Jerusalem was going forth and gaps were beginning to close, the Bible records that these enemies became very angry. They plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion in it. You know how this goes, people of God. You know for yourself better than I do. I don't need to explain this to you. You know how when you do what you're supposed to do, you start doing better for yourself. When you mind your own business, be about your business. Somebody always tries to insert themselves into your business to make your business fail. No matter how holy you are, no matter how sanctified you are, no matter how much you pray. It's even here in the text, they prayed in verse 9 and were still tired in verse 10. The reality is, when things like this happen, can and it will make you say, I'm tired of this. Has anybody ever been there before? You ever felt like that sister, one Miss CBCNEWHAVEN? During the Freedom Summit of 1964, the Democratic National Convention said that she's sick and tired of being sick and tired. Have you ever been tired of this? Tired of working every day? Tired of dealing with the same stuff? Tired of dealing with the same people? Have you ever been tired of this? Tired of dealing with folk that you ain't even trying to bother, but they keep on bothering you? Tired of dealing with these same toxic family members, these same egotistical bosses, these same crazy co-workers, these same mean church folk? Have you ever been tired of this? Tired of just being semi-conscious in America? We ain't even got to be all the way woke to be tired of these yet-to-be United States. Oh, I know somebody's tired of Trump. Tired of the system. Tired of glaring injustices. Oh, church, you don't have to say it. I had 3 cups of coffee this morning, and I'll say it for you if you're that tired. I'm tired of black folks dying unnecessarily. Tired of certain folks getting off or barely getting a slap on the wrist. Tired of a broken judicial system. I'm tired of baseless explanations. I'm tired of cheap grace and unaffordable justice. I'm tired of guilty tears. I'm tired of excuses. I'm even tired of hugs. Tired of this. Tired of this. Cat won't meow right. Dog won't bark right. Friends won't do right. Spouse won't do right. Work won't do right. Bills won't do right. Life won't do right. I'm tired of this. Beloved, before we sink too far down into the terrain of time, stand today to let somebody know that God's purpose still prevails through God's people despite your problems. Ooh, that was good, Pastor Andal. Let me say it again. God's purpose still prevails through God's people despite your problems. The good news is, though you may be tired, your God never tires. Psalmist said he neither slumbers nor sleeps, but all of our help cometh from the Lord. Beloved, the fact of the matter is, while you may feel fatigued, while you may be frustrated, while you may feel like you're flailing and failing, reality is God's purpose for you still prevails. You see, your fatigue, your frustration, your feelings are still no match for God's faithfulness. So the question that we all must wrestle with when we come to moments in our lives, on our journeys, when we say, I'm tired of this, the question we must wrestle with is, if God's purposes prevail, how do I prevail as a person who is on assignment for God's purpose? How do I realign myself to be on God's purpose for my life and our life together collectively? But beloved, if the text be true, and I believe that it is, the first thing that you must do when you're tired in order for God's purpose to prevail is you must turn fatigue into focus. Look at the text. There is so much going on with these people. Rebuild the wall to half its height. They have done the impossible. They have done what everybody else said they wouldn't be able to do. Now their neighbors, who are really their enemies, have become very angry because they have mistaken somebody else's progress to be their problem. That's a freebie for you. Never mistake somebody else's progress for your progress. It's progress from the Lord. Don't worry about it. God still has enough purpose just for you. As Dr. Freddie Haynes says, don't hate, celebrate, and one day you might be able to participate. Look at the text. There is so much going on. They have come together. They have rebuilt the wall to half its height. They have both prayed and worked. They have set a guard as protection against their enemies day and night. But verse 10, Judah said, the strength of the burden bearers is failing. There is too much rubbish so that we are unable to work on the wall. Beloved, in order for you to prevail in God's purpose for you, you've got to take inventory of what has fatigued you. You see, they were doing a lot. They were both watching out for their enemies and trying to rebuild the wall. Because they were so busy protecting themselves, the real purpose as to why they were protecting themselves, that is, rebuilding the wall, went neglected and trash began to pile up, so much so that they were unable to do the work that they were supposed to do. If you're going to prevail in God's purpose for you, you've got to understand why you may have grown weary in your well-doing. Yes, it could be that your enemies are doing the most, but it could also be that you are doing the most too. You see, you cannot both protect the wall at night and rebuild the wall during the day. You're burning the candle at both ends, and soon it's going to burn out. You have to do what you have been called to do, and let others who God has placed around you do what they've been called to do. I know you're Superman, I know you're Superwoman, I know you're bad and bougie. I know you took a DNA test and it turns out you're 100% that blessed. That was for my millennials and Gen Zers in the sanctuary. But the reality is you cannot and should not do it all. You see, purpose requires focus. Purpose requires alignment of activity. Purpose requires exclusivity of duties and responsibilities. You cannot be a generalist when it comes to your purpose. You must be a specialist. What is it specifically, uniquely, personally? What is it that God called you to do? Watch this now. What is it that God called you to do today? What is it that God called you to do in this season? Because what God called and wanted you to do yesterday may not be what God is calling and wants you to do today. We can alleviate some of our stress. We can rid ourselves of some of our tiredness by turning our fatigue into focus and figuring out exactly what God's purpose for us is in those moments when we just want to throw up our hands, say some unholy words, walk away and say, I'm tired of this. William Sidney Porter, better known by his pen name O. Henry, became one of the most popular authors in America at the turn of the last century. He wrote for years, but his literary career really took off from a most unlikely place in prison. You see, Porter had been convicted of embezzlement from the bank where he had worked in Texas and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. While there, he wrote and published some of his best-known stories, establishing himself as a premier author. In his interactions with others, O. Henry displayed the same wits that filled his stories. It is said that once, when he attempted to get a royalty check from a New York publisher, he did so without success. He went to the office to try to collect the check in person, only to be told that the person who signed checks was not available because of a sprained ankle. O. Henry said, "My dear sir, does he sign the checks with his feet?" See, oftentimes we can focus so much on what fatigues us and lose sight of what we should be focusing on. We use too much of our precious energy dealing with things that aren't directly related to our purpose or our progress, that we lose sight of what we're supposed to be doing and wind up forfeiting the whole thing. And like O. Henry and his publisher with a sprained ankle, not a sprained wrist, ends up costing both the publisher and O. Henry in the long run. Beloved, if we are going to prevail in our purpose, even when we're tired, we must not only turn fatigue into focus, but we must secondly turn threats into tactics. Look at the text again, child of God. The text says, After Judah said in verse 10, the strength of the burden bearers is failing. The enemy said in verse 11 that they will not know or see anything before we come upon them and kill them and stop the work. And after they themselves said 10 times in verse 12, they said from all the places where they will live, they will come up against us. That, beloved, there comes a point when we have to stop talking about it and start being about it. See the text there, it said Judah said. The enemy said, they said, look at the text, it said, they said 10 times. While every threat is not credible, and while every threat will not be actualized, the reality is we have to deal with them and we have to prepare for them. Of course, we pray for the best, we trust God, but we also plan. So the text says that after Nehemiah heard these various groups and what they had to say, he realigned their purpose. Support where they were now in the work of rebuilding the wall to restore their business. Verse 13, Nehemiah realigns them. He repositions them to go to the lowest parts of the space behind the wall in the open places. He stations people there with their swords, their spears, and their bows. He puts them there so that in the event that should an outside enemy come against them, it'll look like they will have a massive defense force that stood ready, willing, and able to defend if necessary. Watch this too. They never stopped working on the wall. In order to prevail in our purpose, we have to learn how to turn outside threats into internal tactics. These things may be a possibility, but what am I going to do to protect and progress what God has planned for me? So we have to ask ourselves a question: what steps am I taking to move closer to where God is calling me to be? How am I protecting my limited energy, and how am I using it to go the farthest I can go? Before I get accused of being too self-helpish in this gospel message, let's ask ourselves the question: how am I being a faithful steward of the God-given resources that God has placed in my disposal for me to achieve with the power that God put in me? How am I realigning, repositioning, reorienting myself, my resources, and the people around me to support what God wants to work in my life and in our life together right now? See, yes, the threats are real. You know what they are, what somebody else is saying, what somebody else is trying to do, what somebody else is plotting and scheming for you. Let me free somebody. You have no control over that. And you will never have control over that, over what somebody else says, thinks, or does. You just have to figure out what you're going to do when they do what they do. What tactics are you going to put into place to make sure that God's purpose in your life is protected and that you continue to make progress on what God called you to do? See, church family, this week we lost one of the best voices, one of the best opera singers of our time. It's Jessie Norman. Since her passing last Monday, videos of her singing and her being interviewed have been brought to the fore again. One such clip that has gone viral is one where she is asked in an interview this question. The interview asked her, did the critics infuriate you throughout your career? The interviewer said, I just want to know how you respond to critics who take a stand on something you work so hard on that's so much an expression of your personality, and then they feel free to write this sort of stuff. Miss Norman, without missing a beat in that unmistakable voice of hers, replied, well, they might write it, but darling, I don't read it. She said, I don't need it. I know whether or not I've done on stage what I intended to do that night. So whatever I'm able to do, I'm giving all that I'm able to do on that particular night. And if it doesn't suit somebody who is sitting there, not having paid for their ticket to be there, that's what she said, and they find it not to their liking, what does it matter? She said, who are they? They are not my friends. They're not from my family. They're not people who work with me or coach me or have been any way influential in my life. So why should it matter what that person said? Come here and let me bless you. Stop giving enemies and critics more attention than you give God's purpose for your life. This moment, you've got to develop this resilient and godly, confident attitude that you are self-aware and other-aware, that you already know what you've done, what you're doing, and where you're trying to go. See, even like Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, yes, you've got to watch and pray. You've got to have some folk around you who will stay awake when the dark night of your soul lingers on. You've got to have some folk around you who know how to get a prayer through and who will pray for you and pray with you and not pray on you. But you've got to get to a place like Jesus. Despite whatever threats come your way, that you focus on your purpose, that you get to a point where you pray like he did and really mean it and say, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And Father, all things are possible for you, but if you take this cup away from me, but nevertheless, not what I will, but thy will be done. See, some of us are guilty of focusing too much on what they said, what he said, what she said. Some of us are guilty of focusing too much on even what you said, what negative thoughts you're thinking, what doubts you're having, what hang-ups you're experiencing internally. But in order to prevail in your purpose, in order to alleviate some of the tiredness you may be experiencing, you've got to focus not on what they said, not on what he said, not on what she said, not on what you said, but you have to focus on what God said. That leads me to my third and final point. If you're going to prevail in your purpose, even when you're tired, not only must you turn fatigue into focus, not only must you turn threats into tactics, thirdly and finally, you must turn promises into practices. Text says that after all this, Nehemiah looked these things over. He stood up and he said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, he said what he said in verse 14. Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome. Fight for your kin, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. See, Nehemiah tells these tired people, yes, I know you're tired. Yes, I know our enemies are plotting and scheming against us right now. Yes, I know it feels so overwhelming and like we'll never ever get this done. But remember what the Lord promised. Remember the vision that God gave us. Remember how God's hand has come upon us so graciously. Remember how we said we were going to rebuild. Remember how we even rebuilt this wall halfway. Something they said we would never be able to do. And remember, don't be afraid, but remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, who has already brought you this far, which is further than you could have ever imagined by yourself. Mine tells these tired people, remember the Lord of yours, who is great and awesome. Remember this Lord of yours, who is great and glorious, and stand up and fight. Fight for your kin, fight for your sons, fight for your daughters, fight for your wives, fight for your home. Nehemiah says, remember what God promised you. Because what God promises, God makes good. Doesn't matter how fatigued or frustrated or tired you may be, what God promises, God fulfills. So you have to stand up and fight for that. 1856, Henry Brown, a enslaved person in Richmond, Virginia, decided that he didn't want to be enslaved anymore. He knew that if he could just get out of Richmond and get to Philadelphia, which was free territory, that the promise of God's freedom and liberation for him would be a reality. So Henry Brown found himself a box. He found a small wooden crate. He postmarked it to an abolitionist in Philadelphia. He got inside the crate, he sealed himself up and mailed himself to that abolitionist in Philadelphia. You remember the promise that Philadelphia could make him free, that the post office could help him get there. So Henry Brown took the the risk. When he arrived in that crate to that abolitionist 3 weeks later in Philadelphia, the abolitionist opened that box and Henry Brown stood up and said, "My name is Henry Brown, and I was a slave. But I heard about the promise of Philadelphia. I heard about you being an abolitionist, so I'm entrusting my future to you." See, church, he remembered the promise, he took the risk, and he put into practice. When he sat down in the promise enrichment, he was still enslaved. When he stood up in Philadelphia, Henry Brown was a free man. Beloved, you have to turn what God promised you into some real practices in your life. Yes, you'll be taking a risk. Yes, you might feel and even look crazy doing it. But remember, there is no great reward with no great risk. Another story is told, and I'm out of here, that there was a woman who religiously read her Bible every day, sought to live her life by biblical principles and promises. So one day her son came home. After supper, he picked up her Bible, which was worn for much use. As he looked through it, he saw penciled above certain Bible verses the letters TP. See, perused that Bible there, TP was printed above the words, "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." Kept flipping pages in his Bible, mother's Bible, and he saw the letters TP. It's written above that psalm that said, "The Lord is my light, my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" Philippe kept on turning pages in his mom's Bible. Came across another section where TP was written. It's written above, "All things work together for good. Those who love the Lord have been called according to his purpose." He kept flipping those pages and he kept seeing TP appear over certain passages. So the son, intrigued, said to his mama, "Mama, I know you take your Bible seriously. I noticed above some verses you wrote the letters TP. What does that mean?" His mother responded, "Son, I don't just read the Bible. I believe and obey God's word. And TP stands for tried and proven." Mother said to her son, "Son, God's word works." I'm out of here now, but that's all I want to say to somebody today. The son of daughter, God's word still works. If God said it, God will do it. That if God promised it, it shall come to pass. So you can take this book to the bank. You can build your life on this sure foundation. You can stand on these tried and proven promises of God. You see, church, you can stand on his word. Because the Bible that I read tells me that God is not a man that he should lie, and neither the Son of Man that he should repent. You see, this Bible that I read tells me that he remembers his covenant forever, the word which he commanded, even to 1,000 generations. You see, this Bible that I believe says